What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from the quarantine zone again, and we're starting this week off on a great note. We are here with Tomas of At the Gates. Thank you so much for being here today. It's great to have you here.
Hey, it's good to be here too, man.
Yeah,
All
it's
good.
it's so awesome to have you here. Really excited for the brand new album, The Nightmare of Being. Do you consider this just a direct continuation, or just the appropriate follow up to Drink from the Night itself, or is this almost like a new start or a new era for At the Gates?
Yeah, a lot of people, we didn't really think about that so much, but a lot of people actually mentioned that. It sounds like a rebirth a little bit, but the band is finally free of all the boundaries. But I mean, for us, I think we see albums as, snapshots in time. This is where the band is at this particular time. And Nightmare of Being is one of those for us as well. I mean, because if you consider this like the new direction, who knows, the next album might have a new direction again, because that's really what you get without the gates nowadays. You get like something new every time, like a new challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree because when you like compare Slaughter of the Soul to, an album such as To Drink from the Night itself to this new album, like it almost seems like I could tell what song will be off of which album, but I also think that, you do make every album stand out, and it's always, but at the same time it's always At the Gates. Like I know what I'm getting. I know what band I'm listening to, which I think is very hard to
uh,
do.
yeah, that's very important for us as well. I mean, because anyone could experiment, a lot, but yeah, but would it sound like the band you want it to sound like? I always, use the comparison to Entombed. If you compare Left Hand Path to Wolverine Blues, two great albums, two totally different albums, but you still hear it's the same band. It's weird, right? I love that.
Absolutely. Maybe one day we'll get an At the Gates love ballad though, just to really shock the fans.
Yeah, maybe, who knows? Or we will finally do Slaughter the Soul Part Two. I don't know. No, but it's hard. It's hard to it's a hard challenge to develop, but not losing the key elements. But we thrive on challenges. That's kind of like what keeps us going a little bit. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. So it's fair to say that with The Nightmare of Being the first two singles that you released, Spectre of Extinction and The Paradox, this isn't just representative of the whole album. There's a lot more to be discovered and a lot more new tricks and twists, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we write albums in general. We don't write singles,
Hmm.
so it's very hard for us every time. Oh yeah, what's going to be the first single? We're like, yeah, can we just release the whole record at once? But it's of course, modern record labels and how the whole music business works. Now you need to do this, like a video here, video there, whatever. But I think already on the third single, people will get a little bit challenged, and I like that. Um, but I mean, the first two songs are representative in one way because they sound like At the Gates. They're pretty standard At the Gates to say, but they still have new things in them. We couldn't write a song like The Paradox in '96. We were not capable of doing it. With all the different parts it has. That's something we are capable of now.
Yeah. Fair enough. And I think like and to go back to the first question I was saying, I don't think this is a continuation of To Drink from the Night itself. I think it's just a continuation of the At the Gates evolution.
Probably, yeah. And I mean, it's hard to. I mean, we already have lot of different eras. The early era, the Slaughter of the Soul era, the comeback era, and whatever. But yeah, maybe this could be something new again. I don't know. It feels very full right now. The album, like it's very bombastic, dynamic, and it's almost cinematic. It's very big, and that's something we could definitely explore more on the next one. I think.
Do you ever enter the songwriting process with a preconceived idea of what you want it to sound like, or is there a lot of like trial and error or experimentation involved?
We usually have a early on like a discussion where we kind of want to take it, which kind of direction we are interested in taking it. But I mean, we're dealing with art, so it's kind of hard to predict everything. But we had this idea of doing a very large album this time, with a lot of different layers, a lot of different details. And we succeeded with that, but it's very hard to predict it because that's like what artistry is all about, and I love that, you know, where the song takes you a little bit.
Well, I've always said that art, whether it's, music or visual art or any form of creativity, art is life. And once you start it, and it's born, the art takes a life of its own and you're simply its humble guide in a way. So you don't want to suffocate it,
Yeah,
but you also don't want to lose control of it either.
no, I mean that's like I mean, the last album was basically a concept album about that, like the creative process, art as as a tool for oppression or revolution, and I think that's what the title "To Drink from the Night" itself deals with, like being the vessel, basically, for the art, and I think it's that challenge and that creative process is what drives us as a band, and if we don't take on really big projects, we will be bored and then we won't do anything.
Yeah, challenge is the most important thing. Even if it doesn't feel great right away, it's always the most important thing.
Definitely.
Mm. And you mentioned that, like, To Drink from the Night itself was a concept album. As a vocalist, have you always needed to hear the music before you have any lyrical ideas, or can maybe a lyrical idea influence the direction of the music itself?
Yeah, it's definitely both, and I mean, I get that sounds like the boring political answer, but it's kind of that's what we do. We discuss like which kind of emotions do we want this song to carry, and then we write lyrics and music to reflect that. And sometimes I can come up with something that Jonas goes like, "Oh wow, now I know what kind of riff I need to write." Now I know what you're after, or the other way around. I'm like, "Wow, that has a really deep melancholical tone or whatever." Then the song on this part has to go in that direction lyrically as well. So we really feed off each other there and have a lot of nerdy discussions about it as well.
Hmm. Have you ever had like the best lyrics ever, but then they're always like one syllable over like the arrangement of every song you have?
Yeah, I mean it's hard because yeah, you need to like rethink it a little bit sometimes because you might have this perfect idea what you want to say, like verbally you want to say, but then it has to also be the instrument of the voice as well. It because a lot of people, they turn out like poetry books of their song lyrics, and I haven't had the urge to do that yet because for me, my lyrics make sense with the music, not as standalone. Like they are one a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's lyrics that are always so hard hitting. Like when you listen to them with the what like when you understand the lyrics and you're listening to them with the song, they just sound so strong. But then like if you were to just read the lyrics, without any music, like if it was spoken word poetry, it could sound so dead sometimes in a way.
And also like pretentious sometimes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And do you find it to get that inspiration, does ideas sometimes like come out of nowhere in a way, or do you almost have to like put yourself in a certain element in order to get the ideas to come
It's
through?
different with different concepts actually that I've worked with so far. Sometimes I'm just inspired by emotion. I used to say, and that's probably still true, that the Night Eternal, for example, was the first time I looked more into the Spanish Civil War, and but it was not like as a historical thing. It's like the emotion, like that I got from reading about it. That's what I wanted to portray with that song, and then I dive into it and try to like know more and get more emotional input before I write it. So it could be like factual books, so to say, or novels, but it can also be like a certain emotion that I'm after.
And do you find it maybe like the longer you're working on something though, like that maybe the harder it is to kind of maintain that emotional spark that initially inspired you?
Yeah, maybe, but then if that happens, I guess you have to like just scrap it and move along, But so far on the three, sort of say, comeback records, we had the initial idea where we wanted to take it, and we kind of followed through every time on it. It was not much we had to throw away, so to say.
As somebody who is a fan of your lyrics, and I'm always excited as to what the song is about as much as the song itself. I really enjoy it because I do feel like I learned something with every At the Gates album. Do you try to engage the listener into the story or the concept as much as the music, or do you prefer to like leave the albums as open to interpretation as possible?
I mean, it's a I think since that War with Reality, the albums work on different layers depending on how you want to listen to them. Uh, and that's something I worked hard on. That should be able to hit you just straight away, as lyrics that you don't really care about. You just hear it with the music. If you're a little bit more interested, you should like figure out the basic concept with just hearing the lyrics, and then it's like we have all these layers where you can go deeper. And if you're curious, you can like find the reference points and go further into it. But I always believe also that like all art is created, by the listener or the viewer or whatever. That's where when the art happens. And I try to not, write on people's noses, so to say. Don't be too obvious, because then it needs a little bit of challenge also to get into it. Otherwise, it won't stick.
Yeah, definitely. And like being that, like you have one album about the Spanish Civil War, and like, do you and you mentioned like emotions influence this, but like, so it's fair to say, but I want to ask, like, when it comes to these concepts, is there maybe like a lot of research that's involved with referencing history as well? Like, do you consider research and, having looking up forms of literature as almost as part of the songwriting as writing the lyrics?
Yeah, definitely. If you have like a concept that you're working around, and I mean, we had that for the last three albums. I want to know as much as possible before, so I know kind of, what I'm dealing with, and also that's inspiration for me to read up upon it, and might take me down a different road that I didn't know about before. Then with pessimism on this last record, I was, amateur, with it, so I needed to know more. To like, I was curious, but I also wanted to be, as you said, like leave the listener curious as well.
Yeah, I think you have a great way of making it mysterious. It's not like this is how it started and this is how it ended. I think like every
Yeah,
song almost has like a cliffhanger, like in a way.
yeah, maybe, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, if you want to draw people in, get their attention, so they listen, but then after that, like make up their own idea what I'm trying to say, because otherwise, I mean, I love bands that have direct lyrics as well. I'm a huge fan of hardcore punk, for example, and some of the lyrics there are like, yeah, no war, yeah. But, but sometimes you need the straight lyric, but I can't write that anymore. I don't get anything out of it. I need like these big projects to get started.
Well, being that, the albums do thrive on conceptual elements, it's fair to say that an At the Gates album is not what I like to say shuffle friendly. Like with the new album, The Nightmare of Being, they should start off with Spectre of Extinction and end with Eternal Winter of Reason. It's not like they could, start off with, The Fall into Time and end with, The Abstract Enthroned or something like that.
Yeah, and I mean, we're old school people. We write for the album, and definitely even for the vinyl album. The Fall into Time is the first track of the B side for a reason. We take a lot of time focusing on the sequencing, actually, and actually sometimes write specific parts for the sequencing. You know,
Which it's cool that you have that sort of element behind it where like you have like an underlying armature that ties your songwriting together. It almost seems like there's you take a new approach to every album, but there are roots to your original structure so you don't lose yourself.
no, exactly. I mean, that's the thing. It should be at the gates, but it should still at the same time be, wow, what's this? you know.
Now, I gotta ask this, and I'm pretty sure every media outlet has been asking you about this on this press tour, with the last year being the 25-year anniversary of Slaughter of the Soul. But before I ask that, next year in 2022 is the 30-year anniversary of the debut full-length album, The Red and the Sky Is Ours. And I just want to ask, like, going back to 1992, take me back to that time. At this point, I don't exist yet. I want to like know like what was the thought process behind that, because you mentioned that it was in the comeback that you started approaching things from a more conceptual level. So what was your formula back then in a way?
I think we had this like almost like what do you call it, like a pamphlet that we wrote to ourselves, that we should never really have boundaries, and we should try to like explore different arenas for the death metal sound. We wrote that like as 18-year-olds. It's pretty what do you call it, ambitious, and um, but of course the difference is we were not really musical enough to 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 be able to play the kind of stuff that we wrote. And that's why those early albums sound like they do, which I kind of love as a listener, but as a musician, you like go back, I only hear the mistakes, you know. But it's definitely one of those things that we play a hell of a lot over our ability. We really wanted to be the King Crimson of death metal, you know. But we were 18 year old and had played for a year, you know, in our instruments. But I like that ambition. It's almost like obnoxious, youthful ambition, you know. Um, and I think that's kind of like come full circle now because we still try to do the same thing, but it's now rooted in, you know, we know what we're doing a little bit more. But that also makes us more secure about what At the Gates is. So we don't even have to think about that. That's already in our DNA, you know.
Yeah. And going to Slaughter the Soul, like what I really wanted to ask about this particular album, first off, it does have a legacy. Like they can, it's just on the level of death metal classics, whether it's Tomb of the Mutilated by Cannibal Corpse, Carcass's Heartwork, The Sound of Perseverance by Death. But the real question I want to ask you is that so many bands who are not even in the melodic death metal genre take inspiration from that. When you see like the metalcore movement, how they were citing Slaughter of the Soul as their influence in a way. And I don't know if you know this, but here in New York City, there's a whole melodic death metal scene that inspired this. Like a lot of underground bands like Solemn Vision and Dead City Crown and so much. Like when you hear on how people take inspiration from this album, do you does that inspire you in a way too? Does that make you look at that album with a different perspective than when you first wrote it?
It's hard to look at your own art in that way, but I mean, of course, it's inspiring and it's rewarding that people, you know, take to your work. And I guess that album came out at the right time, and it was exactly what people didn't have right then, you know, in a way that people might be looking for exact that the you know the convergence of what you know all those different styles that be compressed into this 30 minutes, you know. Um, but the whole early career of the Gates kind of built towards that album. You know, we're compressing the songs more and more for every album. It's more streamlined, more direct and to the point. But after that album, we couldn't go further with that. You can't compress it further. You know what I mean? And that hence that's when we come back, we kind of try to incorporate all of At the Gates styles in every album that we do since we come back, not just the Slaughter of the Soul era.
Hmm.
But I mean, for us, there's no problem with it, the status of that record, uh, because of course it could be like a little, you know, like a millstone around your neck a little bit, but it doesn't. You know, it is inspiring actually. And I mean, when we came back with that War with Reality, we kind of noticed that pretty like early on, the staples in the live set from that War with Reality were as almost as appreciated as Lord of the Soul tracks, and so we were like, okay, we're on the right track here. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. There is like the fear of being enslaved to success, but I'd imagine that when so many bands from in Gothenburg, from the Dark Tranquilities and the Soilworks and the In Flames and whatever, did you almost kind of like look at you and your fellow bandmates, being like, "What have we done?"
Yeah, a little bit. No, but I mean, no, it's kind of fun, you know, and I'm proud of it because we were so young. We were, 21 when we recorded that album. It's recording the fourth album when you're 21 and becoming a classic like that. It's wow. It's kind of mind blowing in a way, but that's why we always try to keep our feet on the ground. You know, we have our day jobs. We try to be normal persons so it doesn't get to our heads. You know what I mean?
Well, fair enough. But and again, I'm excited to hear the Nightmare of Being in a Live setting. I cannot wait to hear this brand new album. But do you think maybe with the 30-year anniversary of The Red and the Sky Is Ours, and the now 26th year of Slaughter of the Soul, but let's just say, because there was no shows happening at that time, let's just call it the 25-year anniversary. Maybe like a cool anniversary tour of some deep cuts or something like that.
Yeah, I mean it's possible. I mean, as I said, the very early records has some kind of, as I think I quoted it as like youthful, obnoxious ambition in a way that is hard to duplicate a little bit. It's very hard to play those songs with the same feel. You
Mm,
know,
yeah.
sort of a soul. We can do that. That's like that's more closer to what we do now. But we did play some of the songs at Roburn Festival in Holland the other year. Uh, some weird, like we did the Scar, for example, from the Red and Sky Hours. There's a possibility for sure. And but some of the sort of the soul review, like the what do you call it, shows are not canceled; they're actually just postponed.
Hmm.
So we will still contractually have to do those next year.
Hmm. Do you think that, and kind of, you mentioned that when you came back from hiatus, that you were able to kind of like, explore more conceptual elements. Did maybe part of that was playing with other bands such as Lock Up or Grotesque, or like maybe exploring other territories? Did that maybe influence your songwriting process to bring into At the Gates, or those two are all the bands like completely different creative mind frames?
Yeah, a little bit the latter there, because it's when I write for a band, I try to get into that mindset and see where we are, and what can we do within this framework so it doesn't stray from what the band is. Um, but of course, you get subliminally influenced by everything you do, and we write with other people and so on. So probably a little bit, but I think for us, when we came back with that more with reality, we just wanted to prove ourselves that we were worthy of returning with a new record, and hence the concept, to make it like bigger and what do you call it, like more important, like we showing our fans that this is important for us. This is how much we care about this. We're going to do a full blown concept album. It's going to be, you know, it's going to have stuff from every era of At the Gates on the same album. And it's like, this is a huge project. We're not just going to rehash what we did before, Start of the Soul Part 2 or something. We're going to do something big, and after doing it more with reality, we're kind of like, yeah, okay, we're stuck here. We have to do even more and more and more.
Yeah.
So that's why we're still developing, and I think it's really interesting.
Well, I've noticed that with melodic death metal bands, they always have great comeback albums in a way. Like, you coming back with that War with Reality was great, and Carcass with Surgical Steel coming back with that. It almost just seems like comeback albums. If it's a melodic death metal band coming back and they're doing a comeback album, I think it's fair to say we're in pretty good shape.
I think it's also important, like we kept our shops, what I mean. We played in other bands all the time between the 96 and what is 2014. We played in a lot of other bands, so we were all warmed up already. It's not like we hadn't touched our instruments for 12 years. We were constantly active, so I think that also helped the reunion as well, that we were actually developed as musicians during the break.
Definitely. Definitely. And I have two more questions for you. But when it comes to seeing At the Gates live, like I kind of got on board late with At the Gates, seeing you live. The first time I saw you live was on the Behemoth tour from 2018, and then again with Amon Amarth and Arch Enemy in 2019. But when it comes to playing live, do you channel a similar energy into your live presence as you do when you're songwriting, or is songwriting and playing live two completely separate arts that you have to master?
I mean, it's how can you say this? The live experience of At the Gates is kind of, it's taken through that filter, like, because we really have to carry those emotions of the songs that we have, carefully crafted at home, in a secure environment, so to say, but to fully express all those emotions and be those emotions on stage, that's like more naked in a way. It's you're vulnerable, and it gets to a certain point where you're like one with the song and one with the audience, that you can't do when you're just writing the songs. It is two different worlds, but the art is the same. It's just like a different, you're almost like the vessel, like we talked about, but very more like vulnerable. You're just out there on the stage, just doing your thing, but it's not really you, it's the song.
Mm. Do you almost have to like practice crowd interaction and stage presence like as much as the music itself in a way?
No, that's just comes natural. That I think that's why we try to steer away from doing live streaming as much as possible. We'll see if we might have to do it eventually with this, but because we can't really just act in front of a camera. We can do it for the videos, but a full live show, we feed off the crowd. That's it's like that interaction. You can't fake that.
Mm. Set up a bunch of dolls everywhere and
Yeah.
hmm.
If we would do something like that, we probably would try to figure out a way to make it even more interactive, even if it's online.
So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today and for such a great conversation. Is there just anything else that you would like to promote with the release of the Nightmare of Being? Like, obviously, thanks to a certain bullshit virus that shall not be named. Obviously, shows aren't in the works at the moment. Things are starting to maybe pick up again. But is there a chance that we could see At the Gates on the road quite a bit with the release of this new album?
Yeah, definitely. But we haven't been so active booking stuff now, like as close to the release, because it's a big process of booking shows that might be canceled. But we have started to book from like December onwards, and the whole of next year is pretty filled already. So we're definitely trying to like figure out a way to promote this album, not just promote the album, but like meeting the fans, playing the new album in a live setting as soon as possible. And it will be really cool. I really look forward to it.
Yeah, and we look forward to seeing you. This new album is insane, and it's great to get another taste of At the Gates. But thank you so much, everybody. At the Gates, The Nightmare of Being, coming out this year. Be sure to pick it up if you haven't already. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.